Thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, your true crime news source for missing persons, breaking cases, survivor stories, and cold cases, plus recommendations for the newest TV shows and podcasts. We're just a ragtag cult of web sleuths who like to fight for social justice, bring awareness to domestic violence, and get the word out about missing persons, while taking breaks to pet the MMM goats. I'm Aurora.
And I'm Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at patreon.com/murdermurdernews. This is the Week in True Crime.
We do want to issue a disclaimer that while our name is Murder Murder News, we often focus on missing persons, survival stories, and sexual assault, giving preference to cases affecting BIPOC and LGBTQIA communities, and some that may not be getting enough attention by mainstream media. Our intent is to bring attention to these cases and make sure these stories are told from the perspective of the victim or survivor. We do our best to report accurate information about these cases, but because they are still breaking, it can be hard to find reliable information. We love hearing your feedback, so just send us a message if the information we have researched is inaccurate or out of date, if you just think we got it wrong, or if you want us to help share you or your loved one's story. Our email is always open at murdermurdernews@gmail.com.
This past Saturday, Joshua Phillips, the perpetrator of a vicious attack on his ex-girlfriend and her young daughter the previous weekend, was arrested and taken to Spokane County Jail. 35-year-old Kassie Dewey was found dead in the garage of her home in Spokane, Washington, on Sunday, April 11th, after police responded to a 911 call from one of her children. Her two oldest children had been at their dad's house and came home to a house in disarray and heard a car running inside the locked garage. Authorities discovered Kassie's body inside, as well as her 5-year-old daughter Lilly, who was badly injured, and their attacker, Joshua Phillips. Phillips had also started both cars inside the garage, which were still running when police arrived. Lilly Dewey was rushed to the hospital with multiple stab wounds and remains in intensive care. Kassie Dewey died from multiple stab wounds. Joshua Phillips was a bit disoriented when talking to paramedics and was also taken to the hospital, where he was under police watch until his release last Saturday, which immediately preceded his arrest. Kassie Dewey's children said she and Phillips fought constantly when they were together, and Cassie's friends said their relationship made them fear for her safety. As well, 2 other women from Joshua Phillips' past had sought protective orders against him. Things escalated to murder after Kassie ended their relationship just 2 days before. And reports say that the day before the attack, Phillips sent her over 100 text messages, some of them very disturbing. Joshua Phillips is being held on a $1.5 million bond and is facing charges of second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. A vigil was held last Wednesday in memory of Kassie Dewey, and a GoFundMe campaign was started to cover the costs of Lily's medical care and to support all 3 of Cassie's children who have lost their mother. We will post a link to that page in the details below. If you are experiencing domestic violence, you can call the National Domestic Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or go to thehotline.org. We'll post those and other resources in the details below, along with our sources for this story, which include People, The Spokesman, and KXLY. Don't miss the latest episode of our podcast, which is also out today, where we'll take a closer look at the cases we discuss in this video.
If you live in Austin, Texas, or if you consider yourself a web sleuth, we really need your help finding Sierra Hunter. 19-year-old Sierra has been missing from Anadarko, Oklahoma since April 4th, but her family believes she is now in Austin and is likely in danger. On April 8th, she called her sister from a Texas phone number. We spoke with Chelsea about that phone call.
She called me. She was just hysterically crying, and it was just, now that I know it, I know it's terrifying. It's so terrifying. And she was just saying things that didn't make sense. She kept saying, "Chelsea, do I have anything important to do today?" And I'm like, "What?" She was like, "Do I have anything important to do today?" And I literally repeated myself. I said, "What are you talking about?" And she yelled at me and she said, "Chelsea, do I have anything important to do today?" And now that I know that she's missing, I kind of go back to the thing where I was thinking in my head, like, she was probably around someone where she couldn't talk or say what she needed to say. It sounded like she was panicking. And then she just told me, I love you, everything will be okay, so disconnected.
Chelsea didn't realize that at the time of the phone call, her sister was missing. Sierra is schizophrenic and is currently not being treated, so while Chelsea realized she was in distress, she didn't know she was in danger. Sierra called her brother the same day and was also hysterical during that phone call. A few days later, Chelsea heard from her mother that Sierra had been missing for 11 days, but she had not yet filed a police report. So Chelsea jumped into action, filed a missing person report, and hired a private investigator. The private investigator was able to trace the phone number Sierra had called from to a man in Austin, Texas, who was a felon with a violent sex offense on his record. Sierra's family does not think she knew this man. They don't think she knows anyone in Austin, Texas, and they don't believe she intentionally traveled there on her own will. Chelsea spoke with the man on the phone, but his story about how he met Sierra kept changing.
His story is that she was on the side of the road in Austin, Texas with no shoes on, and he picked her up and took her to his house in Austin, Texas. He has an apartment, and that she went to the bathroom for 2 hours, came out, and she was bald, and he didn't know why. And he said it freaked him out, so he drove her somewhere in Austin, Texas, and made her get out of his car and left her. But he said his statement was that he watched her walk towards the woods. He had given us a general location, and I had done my research in the situation. And whenever I went to Austin, Texas, he had first said that he let her off at a Whataburger. Then his statement was, and that's what he told me. So I found that Whataburger. I called that Whataburger. They didn't see her. I think they checked their surveillance on that. And then he had turned around and said he didn't want to talk to me about it because he felt like I was accusing him of something. And I'm not sure what he thought I was accusing him of. I was very nice to this man whenever I talked to him. And I didn't even know he was a sex offender whenever I was speaking to him on the phone. So he had turned around and said the reason why he didn't tell me the full truth was because he was nervous. And he said he actually let her off at a 7-Eleven in Austin, Texas. And we went to the 7-Eleven that he said he let her off at. And there are woods around there, but I just, it's just so large, we're not getting the type of help we need.
Well, if you ever go missing, you definitely want a sister like Chelsea on your side, because she headed down to Austin and spent 4 days handing out flyers, speaking with unhoused people, and trying to find anyone who might have seen her sister. She did find a couple of people who think they might have seen her around Austin, and a possible sighting in nearby Elgin at a donut shop. The last thing that's very important to mention about Sierra is that she is Indigenous, and we have a big problem with missing and murdered Indigenous women in the U.S. Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to go missing or be killed than white women, and their cases are only ever investigated 30 to 40% of the time. So we need your help getting the word out about Sierra's disappearance. Police are investigating the man who is allegedly the last person to have seen her, but please help share her picture, share the show, share the article that we'll list in the details below, and also our TikTok. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Anadarko Police Department. We could not be more excited to have CJ with us from Beyond the Rainbow, Crimes of the LGBT. Each week, CJ shares missing person cases and true crime cases affecting the LGBT community. And CJ wants you all to know it's not a crime to be gay unless you're a murderer. CJ, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing in sunny California?
Oh, it is sunny here. I'm doing pretty well. Thank you very much. How are you?
We're so good. We're so glad to finally get you. Yes. And what our audience may not know is you are actually the first guest I ever invited on our show. And
I didn't know that.
Yes. And I've been trying to get you on ever since, and we finally tricked you into coming on.
You know what? You didn't really trick me. I got a little more confident after doing Get Vocals.
That's
and
awesome.
I decided, okay, it's not so bad. And I'm so excited about what's coming up in May with you guys.
Oh, yes.
The three of us are actually collaborating very soon for a great cause, which is the Trans Defense Fund of Los Angeles. And we are creating basically a murdery drag show. So it's going to be a great time. So keep an eye on both of our shows for details. You don't want to miss it.
We're so excited to have an event with you, CJ.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
It's going to be
such a worthy cause.
Yeah, it's a perfect chance for us to come together.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So CJ, I think you might have been the very first LGBT true crime podcast. What inspired you to start the podcast?
Well, actually, I'm not the very first one. I heard one that was Britain-based, I believe. They're now defunct. They only lasted probably about 10 episodes. But I heard that, and this was after probably a year of listening to true crime podcasts. And I thought, oh, this is great. I need to start one, and I need to start it with my genre being LGBTQIA. I got the acronym down, but I just usually shorten it to LGBT. Most of the podcasts I was listening to, they would once in a while cover an LGBTQ story, and it just didn't seem fair because there's so many out there. And I believe that the word needs to get out, and a lot of LGBTQ people need their story told.
Absolutely.
So that's why I created Beyond the Rainbow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like the media just often gets those stories wrong. And I love how you often point out on your show, like I was just listening to an episode today where you mention how even like the punishment for crimes is affected when the perpetrator is somebody in the gay community, or if the victim is somebody in the gay community, there will be lighter sentences for somebody who is murdered that is in the queer community, which is absolutely terrible. And these are things that like I never would have thought of, even being in the true crime world and listening to so much true crime. So your show is so necessary for pointing things out like that. Like I care about these things and I never knew that. So thank you for filling that gap. Like it's absolutely needed. Those stories to be told.
Yeah, it infuriates me that an LGBTQ person can be murdered, but the sentence for the perpetrator, if they're heterosexual, is not the same. It's almost as if the LGBTQ person just doesn't matter as much, because if a gay person killed a heterosexual person, the sentence is over the top.
Right.
And how is that fair? How does and why does that heterosexual person that was murdered, why are they more important than the LGBTQ person that was murdered? That just gets me.
Yeah. And like we think we're getting to this very fair place in the world where there's less homophobia and such, but like clearly we're very far from that point. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's really something to keep in mind. If any of our viewers are into social justice and legislation and stuff, like we still live in this very unfair world.
Yeah,
and
it still needs our focus.
Yeah. So CJ, what did get you into true crime in the first place? Was it really loving true crime TV, unsolved mysteries kind of stuff when you were younger? Is it a murder in your hometown? What got you here?
Oh, murder in my hometown, Sacramento, and there were quite a few ones from my hometown.
Definitely.
I just remember as a child being fearful a lot. We had the East Area Rapist, also known as the Golden State Killer. We had Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento. We had Dorothea, and I can never remember if it's Fuentes or Puentes. I think it's with an F. Am I wrong? It might be with a P. But anyway, she was the landlady who ended up killing all of her elderly clients so she could get their social security.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I used to drive by her place after, she was found out, and there was like dirt piles everywhere because she buried a lot of the victims in her own backyard.
Oh
Just
my God.
scary stuff. I used to work in the daycare scene. I was the director for after school recreational program. And I found out a few years back that one of the kids I I say raised like I was his parent, but it was almost like raising him because you see him every day. I found out that he had kidnapped a young girl, a 13-year-old. He was, I want to say 20 at the time.
Oh
He
my
had
goodness.
kidnapped a 13-year-old girl from her junior high, drove her out to what is called the Feather River, raped her and murdered her.
Oh.
And,
Wow.
things like that, just it's part of my life. It
Mhm.
seems like I'm kind of just thrown into the true crime world. I
Wow.
had another situation where one of my families, the father was away at a military training camp and he came back. It was a weapons training. He
Mm.
came back and his wife and her aunt were at the house and he started threatening them and he ended up shooting them. But before he shot them, he called the wife's uncle who had their children. I used to watch their children. And he said, bring them home. I want my children home now.
Oh no.
The uncle wouldn't do it. And thankfully he didn't, because he shot the wife and the aunt, and then he wanted to die by police.
Mhm.
And the police in Sacramento apparently were such bad shots, they never got him. So he finally turned the gun on himself.
Wow.
And that was another big impact in my life.
Yeah, that's a lot, really.
That's a
Yeah.
lot. I actually had
Yeah.
forgotten that you're from Sacramento. Like you have all the hometown murders, like
Mhm.
all of
But
them.
some that are so personal there. That's really,
And
I had told Aurora way back when that this was actually the interview you did for the Murder News magazine,
yes,
EMAG, that when I was little, I had picked up the phone and there was this man's voice and he was saying such sexual, mean, vile things. And I swear I didn't think about it again. And as an adult, right after the Golden State Killer got
oh my
captured,
goodness.
I was listening to his phone conversation where he threatened some woman, and I'm all, oh my God, that voice, that's the same voice I heard as a child. I know it is. And for
Oh
that
my goodness.
to just spark for me, it made me think that had to be the Golden State Killer that called me as a child. Although my mom kept
Wow.
saying, "Oh no, it was just the teenage neighbor boy across the street." That voice did not
Wow.
sound like the teenage neighbor boy. It was a very
Wow.
much a
You have
man's voice.
so many amazing stories. You definitely were meant to get into this because
I think I might have
wow.
been, yes.
That's
when you just said
incredible.
Sacramento, I like when you said that, it just triggered the memory for me that was your story. And you had told me about that when we first started chatting like a year ago. So we've been podcast friends for a year. And like, I love you so much. And I just
Happy
remembered
anniversary,
that.
honey.
Yes, happy anniversary. So thank you for sharing that story, because when you told me that, I got chills. And
Yeah.
I absolutely believe you, and I'll bet it was him. Like he was doing that all the time. Like he was.
You can't mistake that voice. Like
Yeah.
it is a
Mm-mm.
really particular voice. So
Right.
wow. So it can be kind of hard to find information about crimes in the LGBTQIA community, in part because the media has often overlooked these cases in the past. Yet you do such a good job of really helping the listener get to know the victims. What's your research process like for that?
I'm sure my research process is probably the same as any podcasters. You read as many articles as you possibly can get your hands on. You Google as much as you possibly can. For me, the cases that, well, I don't want to say mean the most, but they really they touch me, or when I can have personal contact with either family members of the victims or friends of the victims. um they bring it to life for me, and they steal my heart in a lot of ways. The cases that touch me the most are the ones that I can have contact with the family or friends with, and I get the most information from. um my case of Ray Hainish, his family, they're so sweet and so loving. And I could see that he was a sweet and loving man just because of them. My case with Zakaria Fry that I did with Eric from True Consequences. She was a trans woman who was murdered along with her elderly roommate. And I got to have some contact with Zakaria's sister, Heather, and she shared a lot of pictures that have never been seen in media.
Wow.
And it just, it just touches you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually the best research I can do. And where I feel the most devoted to a case is when it is the personal contact. And unfortunately, I can't do that with all the cases.
Right. That's great. And I think that really shows in your method of storytelling. Like I've never had a podcast that I've listened to really make me feel so connected to the story. You're a great storyteller, and a lot of podcasts, I think like we even try to tell stories from the angle of the victim, but sometimes you get lost and you find yourself telling the story from the killer's perspective or whatever, just because there's more information available about them.
Yeah.
But when I listen to your podcast,
that's the reason.
I feel like you seldom stray from being on the side of the victim. And I really feel like I get to know them. And a great example of that is you recently told the story of Jason Fox. Again, listening to your telling of that, I felt like I got to know him like I was his friend. Like I got to know him so well through your episode. Like I really felt like you were telling his story. I also thought the episode that you did on LGBTQIA crimes not being classified as hate crimes, that they're kind of misclassified and not taken seriously. I thought that episode was great. Out of all of the cases you covered, is there any particular cases that really keep you up at night?
I don't know if they keep me up so much as they have a big place in my heart. One of them would be, and I did a two-parter on it, would be the Penny Brummer case. She, I feel, was wrongfully convicted of murdering ex-girlfriend's best friend, Sarah. I don't think she did it. I was in contact with Sheila Berry, who is an author, but formerly she was an attorney, but not for Penny. I believe she was an attorney in a different state. Sheila Berry is the one that urged me to do a second episode on it. I was also in contact with one of Penny's friends that used to hang with her and said, oh no, Penny didn't do this. That one really got me. It was one of my first cases where I actually was in contact with personal acquaintances of Penny's. Another one that really touched me was, I had mentioned when we were talking earlier, Lisa Lynn Stone. She was the missing 50. She was 51 when she disappeared. Missing woman from Texas, the Dallas area, I believe. And I reached out to, she had 3 friends that went looking for her, and they were trying to find evidence and build a case to find Lisa, whether she was dead or alive. I reached out to one of them, and she was just so helpful with so much information, although she's been scared for her life because who we suspect possibly did something with Lisa was her ex-girlfriend, and the ex-girlfriend issues a lot of threats and just some bad jujus.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
And then the Ray Hainish case, that one has really touched me too a lot. And and Zakaria Fry, and I just have a whole list. A lot of them just really have touched at my heart.
That's amazing that there's so many of them that you got so personal with. And I think it gives a really special perspective to the way you tell the story. That's again, where you can't find so much information, and where you couldn't find it any better place than hearing it right from their direct friends and family,
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't mention Tawny Bard, or I think it's Baird, from Utah, the young girl who was murdered by her girlfriend in Utah.
Wow.
And she really stuck with me because she reminded me so much of my daughter.
Oh.
Just the cute, bubbly blonde with big blue eyes, and just the outgoing personality and friends with everyone. type person. That one really stuck too.
Wow. Well, on that note, where can our viewers find you on social media?
Are you kidding me? They can find me on Facebook at Beyond the Rainbow Pod. I also have a page called Rainbow Crimes. They can find me on Instagram at Beyond the Rainbow Pod or Rainbow Crimes 12 because I accidentally made 2 accounts on Instagram. And they can find me on Twitter at Rainbow Crimes, as well as I now am on Tumblr at Rainbow Crimes.
Wow.
And the one you guys always use, TikTok, Rainbow Crimes.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, so be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Rainbow wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode.
Thank you. And if you play Call of Duty on Xbox, you can find me at Rainbow Crimes 839.
Wow, that's amazing.
I'm going to start.
Okay.
This week, we're watching Why Did You Kill Me on Netflix. The documentary dives into the murder of Crystal Theobald in 2006 in Riverside, California. The case seemed like it would never be solved until Crystal's mother, Belinda, and her cousin used MySpace to catfish members of a gang they believed to be responsible for her death. It's such a great example of web sleuthing to get the job done. Have you watched the documentary yet? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder News by visiting our Patreon at patreon.com/murdernews. We have some great benefits like merch, a shout out on our YouTube and podcast, exclusive episodes, and early access to tickets for our live online events. Your support helps us feed the MMN goats, add to our community wig wall, and help support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.